despite using match 3 mechanics, it really isn't a match 3 game. None of the encounters are really built like match 3 encounters, because even if you're doing the same actions, the goals of what you're trying to use this system for are so fundamentally different that it ends up confusing match 3 gamers, because they're like, well, I'm trying to set up these giant combos, and I'm just like, the combos don't matter. Like, you think the combos matter because that's what your brain is telling you to do, and like, that's intuitive, and I get it. It's not like you're wrong, but like, it's not what this is built for.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazell, and this is DevDoc, a show where I get a chance to talk to the most interesting game developers about their games. And today, we are here with the crown jewel, most interesting man alive, Colin McInerney, here to talk about Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 1 Re-Raptored. You were smiling. Let's go into that. What are the thoughts running through your head as we start this interview?
I just cannot possibly imagine that I'm the most interesting game dev alive.
Well, I mean, hey, I have to say, you are the very first person I've talked to out of the, I think, 48 that I've recorded that is recording from bed. I mean, that's got to count for something. That's pretty interesting.
It's interesting until you realize that, like, I was recording from bed because he has gout, because bad genes have cursed him at age 32. Which I don't know if that's terribly interesting, but I mean, I'll take the compliment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know what? I would want to spin things positive here today, and so I'm happy that you're recording from bed.
I am too. It's comfortable, and my foot doesn't hurt anymore, at least. So we take the wins where we can get them.
Well, I think we should also distract you by talking about a little video game you are working on, and as of uploading, the game is out, and people can go play it. I'll, of course, be leaving a link in the description to go purchase it. Go buy it, you lazy sacks of shit. Today, we're going to be talking about Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 1 Re-Raptored, the game that you have been working on with your team, Pedalboard Games. I want to talk about how you got to this point, because I actually did an interview with someone you know, Dan Pierce, who worked on the game Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 3. That was April, I think, May? And so we are talking within the same year about another game in the same series. And there's a couple of things that lead to that happening, which is why I'm so excited to talk to you. In the first moment that I heard that this game was happening, I'm like, I need to lock this in. I have to cover this story. I think it's important for us to talk to the audience a little bit about who you are and what got you to the point where you're making this set of games. So what's the Colin McInerney origin story with you in video games?
I mean, the quickest summary possible, start to finish. I have an older brother who he's 4 years older than me, so he, as video games are starting to become like more common in households, he was like the right age to want a Nintendo 64. So he wore my dad down about it when he was 7 and I was 3, and we got Super Mario 64. And so I started playing video games really, really young, and then just kind of kept going and got worse. And then in high school, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I had learning disabilities. I switched from public school to a private prep school, and then failed out of that and went to what used to be a halfway school for problem kids that turned into a place with learning resources and ways to help kids with learning disabilities. And so I was one of 12 graduating seniors in that class. Thankfully, the result of that was the teachers knew us all really well. And so one of my teachers said, hey, you don't seem to know what you want to do for college. Have you thought about going to learn to make video games? And the honest answer was no, I just didn't really think about that as a job that people did. Despite, playing video games my entire life at that point, and then seeing credit rolls, knowing these have to be made by people, but having no insight into what that actually
could have been random text.
Right.
Weird,
but indistinguishable, especially when you grow up with playing Japanese games and all the names are Japanese, and it's these aren't, I'm 3 years old, these aren't names that I've ever seen before. I don't have a way to connect to the human
Where
side.
are the Joes and the Bills?
Right. Who are the who the fuck is Koizaki? I took his advice and I went to college for game design. Very fortunate that my parents were able to pay for college, so I did not have student debt, which is why I went to college in the first place. And then I got into a grad program at UT Austin that was being run by Warren Spector. Program ended, and I was in Austin where the game jobs were that weren't in California. So I stuck around in Austin and ended up at Alchemy Labs, where I was for 5.5 years. I started in QA and basically got converted from contract to full-time because like I had enough programming knowledge to like implement a stupid joke for like an interaction. For anyone that's played Rick and Morty VR, that was the first title I shipped with them, and there's like a little alien that you have to feed a laxative to make it shit as part of progression, and the laxative was like an edible object. Someone had put like the edible tag on it, and so you could eat it, and it had bite states and all of this stuff, but it didn't make you shit. And I'm like, that it's a laxative. It should make you shit. You feed it to the thing, it makes it shit. Like that has to work. And so, you know, I spent like an hour that day recoloring the green alien poop to brown and, you know, like duplicating the prefab and just setting up a simple spawner so that when you ate it, like it shit right below your floating head. And that got me hired full time.
Amazing.
Like 4 months or like, you know, 3 months before they were acquired by Google. And so, you know, I didn't get like a huge buyout or anything, but it was enough to like put a down payment on a house in Austin in 2017, 2018. In 2018, about the time I bought the house, I was like kind of bored, especially working on Vacation Simulator. Which at the time I just kind of felt like was Job Simulator, but less funny. I branched out into making a mobile game just to see if I could do it. I wanted to be able to, like, I knew that I wouldn't be at Alchemy forever, and I wanted to have something that I could, like, just pull out and show to people. I ended up working on that super part-time for about 1.5 years and starting a little company and enlisting some friends to help, and we made a mobile game called All Hands on Deck, which I took in January 2020 to what would end up being the final PAX South. The three of us were there, and with some help from my wonderful dear friend Allie Griggs, she helped me build an arcade cabinet backpack where we like took the backing off of like a hiking backpack and bolted it to a custom frame that essentially held an iPad and had like a light in a banner. And I still have this thing in my office. I love it. And we walked around PAX playing other people's games and like engaging with other game devs, but then there's this game on my back and people would come up and play it and had a good time with it. And I ended up talking to some devs who were hosting like an LGBTQ plus party for PAX South, which is like, you know, it was the queer mixer party essentially. And All Hands on Deck had pride pigs in the game, and they were the only things besides the basic pig that weren't locked behind any microtransactions or anything like that, because we just felt that like selling pride is gross, and we didn't want to do that.
That would have been a little weird,
yeah, and like it's that is a weird thing to like include and then be like, we're gonna make you pay for it, right?
Inclusivity. Give me $5.
Right. And that statement of intent was enough that they were like, yeah, come to this party, like you belong there. So we ended up going to this party, and who should be there but Xalavier Nelson Jr. showing off an airport for aliens currently run by dogs. And that is how I met Xalavier. I was playing dog airport game while he was on my back playing All Hands on Deck. So we became this very intimate game dev Ouroboros of
human centipede
each other's games. Well, no, because the human centipede it's like it's one end, like it stops, right? The Ouroboros eats itself.
Oh,
I was playing his game. He was playing my game.
But you were in a line.
Yeah, but there's like a metaphysical loop in my view of this. I think
we'll get Xalavier's opinion on it.
yeah, he'll weigh in. Although he just had a baby, so he might be a little busy to weigh in right now. But no, so we ended up talking and staying in touch, and we were, you know. And then about 1 year later, as the pandemic was like starting to wind down a little bit, my uncle passed away, and I drove out to Houston with a U-Haul to basically meet my parents there and bag up his gigantic collection of comic books.
Oh, interesting.
Like, you know, tens of thousands of volumes.
Holy
like huge
shit.
Like hoarder levels of shit from a guy who like didn't care about much else in the world other than his comic books.
Wow.
As I was at this hotel, I'm like browsing through Twitter because I wasn't like near my girlfriend at the time, and I didn't really want to hang out with my parents for like 5 days straight. So I'm like sitting in the hotel lobby and scrolling through Twitter, and Xalavier is tweeting about how Bethesda are cowards for not making another game with the Oblivion Persuasion Wheel, and I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, he's right.
Yeah.
And he said he had a game idea, and I reached out to him and was like, hey man, I want to make this game with you. How do we make that happen? And I believe his response was something like, answer very carefully, how serious are you about this? And so we ended up talking on the phone, I think later that night. And he kind of told me about Strange Scaffold and what the whole deal with the studio was, and asked if I was like interested in being a part of that. And I said, like, yeah, man, like, absolutely. And then if you want the rundown on how that happened, go watch Noodle's How Does an Indie Game Get Made video, because that will give you an hour recap of the entire history of Bass Reeves Can't Die. And
I will definitely leave a link to that in the car. I love that video.
And yeah, and what I was up to at the time. So fast forward, Bass Reeves doesn't come out, and
Bass Reeves dies.
Right, and Strange Scaffold is sort of on life support, trying to get El Paso Elsewhere out the door. So I got pulled onto Life Eater and designed a bunch of puzzles about kidnapping people. So yeah, so I was at Don't Nod, and I worked on Lost Records Boom and Rage for about a year, but it was a very cool team, but I just like making smaller games more, and so being on like a 70-80 person team working in Unreal and having to like check out individual parts of a level was just like, to me, I view that as like cruft in the way of getting in the way of making games, because if I can make something that is like smaller in scope and still get my message across, I feel like I'm making good use of my time. So I reached out to Xalavier and was like, hey man, I need something that I can dump my whole self into. He said, yeah, we're rebooting Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 3 again, and like I think you'd be perfect to like be on board with that and essentially be the co-lead, or like be the programming lead even. And I was like, okay, sure. You know, like at this point I've got a lot more confidence. I've shipped more games. I've like coded a game front to back by way of the Gene Splicer. I've shipped Life Eater as a content designer. I'm feeling like more confident. And I was working crazy hours and put myself in the pain box a little bit, more than I had to, for sure. It was a project that really just clicked with me because it was like a perfect intersection of all the stuff I like doing. When it came time to do CRDM1, it was almost a no-brainer because, like, at the time, Xalavier didn't have any work for me. Like, Truck Kun was going to have a smaller staff, so I just, everything else was staffed, and I just wasn't on a project, which is fine, because I had been shipping CRDM3. And so Xalavier and I talked a little bit, and I was like, yeah, I kind of thought that there'd be a thing for me, and it's fine that there's not. Like, I'm not going to freak out about that, but like I was kind of hoping to keep working on something, and it's kind of a bummer that I'm not. And he was like, well, I've wanted to do this thing for a while. How would you feel about if Pedalboard got to do CRDM1?
Well, there's a couple steps there that I want to make sure we take a step back and explain to the audience who are not maybe as familiar as, of course you are, but at least to what I am, of the inner workings of Strange Scaffold's culture and your studio Pedalboard as well, is that you have your own studio now. The Pedalboard Games are you and your team are the ones that made CRDM1, and I'm curious where that studio gets its start for you and why you feel that it was necessary to add something on top of the work that you were already doing to build your own studio and your own culture to make your own direction.
So, there's a couple of reasons. So, first of all, Pedalboard formed pretty organically. So, I, again, wasn't sure, like, what I was going to do job-wise, and I knew that I had this GDC talk that I was doing with my friends. And so I kind of wanted to have something going on, even if I wasn't, like, actively working, because I knew that basically, at that point, all of my contracts, Don't Nod and Strange Scaffold, were pretty much wrapping up in April. So I was like, okay, I need to get ahead of things a little bit, because like there is with the way the game industry is going, there is a very real possibility that I'm jobless after April. And that did end up happening for a little while. You know, unsure of what to do and not really able to take on another project. The idea of doing a game jam about the Oblivion Wheel after the Bass Reeves video kind of happened because people watched the Bass Reeves video and were like, I still don't understand how this stupid fucking wheel works. So I made a post about it on Blue Sky because I had built the wheel for Bass Reeves. So I had deconstructed it and built the whole thing, and like I still had that project. From that post, people were like, "Oh, this is really cool. I finally understand how this wheel works," and the idea of like a game jam, because I had this wheel template, sort of started floating itself. And obviously, I didn't want to use Strange Scaffold's code for like a public project and then just be like, this is available for people. So just to see if I could, I re-implemented the wheel with the idea of like, I'm going to write this in as few scripts as possible, ideally one script, and just like make this the most basic template that people can use to make games with. That idea kind of set me down the game jam path, and I knew that Godot was really popular for game jams. And I knew that I didn't know shit about Godot. So I posted on Blue Sky being like, hey, I've got this Unity Oblivion Wheel template. Is anyone interested in porting this to Godot or even doing a Scratch implementation? And Shane Scott, a game developer from Winnipeg, who has been like game jamming in Godot, like, since very early, he answered the call and was like, yeah, I would love to port this to Godot, and did it in like a couple days. At that point, we made a Discord and started like talking about like how we were going to set up Wheeljam, and started like prepping things for Wheeljam and getting like a server ready so that when people were doing the jam, they would have a place to talk about it. And from there, Shane pulled in Tav Villamar. Tav is a graphic designer, UI, UX, web developer, kind of wonderkind. Aiden, our composer, didn't actually even like do music to get involved. They just like made a logo, which ended up going on like the Wheeljam hoodies that we printed off when it was like very few of us involved. So from there, the four of us, we're like talking about like, oh yeah, let's make games when this is over.
Yeah,
like this is a good group. We didn't really have many artists, and the artist that I've constantly been kicking around project ideas with for the last 5 or 6 years is my friend Sean. And he just has this really, really good anime art style that he defaults to, but he's really versatile and can draw like a ton of different stuff, and is really good at like sketching out really quick ideas. And then his wife Savannah, who is not only also a great artist who can sketch out ideas really quickly, but like does marketing for her day job. So she's also like an excellent copywriter and a regular writer and editor. And so that became Pedalboard. That was the 6 of us, and we're now this close to shipping a game, and we have actually gotten our first bit of funding to start our next game, and like the whole thing has been moving along just very organically and very much built on the idea that like we just want to make games together. This isn't about like trying to build up a big thing. It's not about trying to like establish a brand to like sell later. It's like, no, this is our label that we want to make games under because we all like making games together. And really the only reason that I'm the studio head is that no one else really wanted to touch the business or deal with like having a legal entity or deal with like finding funding and all of that shit. And like someone has to do it, and I can talk forever, so I just don't mind like reaching out to folks and having those conversations. And I've done enough research and helped lead enough games that I was like, I think I can take on the studio head thing and like learn the business stuff as I go. And I had enough support from working at Strange Scaffold and doing the things I've done over the years and just trying not to be a dickhead, that when I reached out to people and asked for help, they were really just more than willing to give it. As I'm going through and forming Pedalboard, really the goal is to grow this thing very slowly and try to make it sustainable in the long term so that I can provide that kind of support to people who don't have it. Because at the end of the day, like, I just want to make cool games and I want to enable people to make cool games. And that's why I'm like taking on this studio head role, because it's not just about like me making games, it's also about my team members making games, and I want them to make things that they're proud of and happy contributing to. And so that is how we got to where we are today.
Well, today is Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 1, a game that we have up to this point in the interview not talked too in depth about, but it is a game that has a interesting context based on the fact that Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 3 released earlier this year. As you mentioned, a game that you worked on alongside Strange Scaffold. And then you were able to, with the experience with working on that game, on knowing the Strange Scaffold team, build this unique circumstance in which your team, a separate entity from Strange Scaffold, is able to use what you and your team at Strange Scaffold built for CRDM 3 to make a continuation of that with the same assets and the same code as your own team. And this is not something that is done often, if ever, and it's something that you an agreement that you've set up with Strange Scaffold. And so let's talk about how you came to this unique agreement that I think has a name, but I can't remember what you called it.
It is the Strange Scaffold Project Share
System, yeah, or program, yeah. So talk about the Project Share program and how that then specifically CRDM 1 became the first game in that sort of concept.
Well, I mean, I think I touched on it a little bit, which is just that, like, Xalavir didn't have any work for me, and I had started Pedalboard, and we were looking at games we wanted to make, and he was like, hey, if you take this code base that you know, and you make the lowest budget sequel you can possibly make, I think you can just turn a profit by nature of it being a sequel to a Strange Scaffold game, and by your ability to make a video game. Like, it's possibly the safest launch that a first release could be.
Yeah, interesting.
Because we can cross promote with Strange Scaffold. We have the bundle for people who aren't aware. If you own CRDM 3 and you decide to buy CRDM 1 Re-Raptored as part of that bundle, you will get 25% off the base price, and that will stack with our launch discount, so you'll be able to get the game for $6.49 instead of $9.99. That was the other big thing, was because we're using a pre-built code base and making a more like straightforward game. It's a lot more linear than CRDM 3 is, just by nature of like the shorter dev time and the things we wanted to do with it. We thought, why charge the same amount? Let's charge less. It's a fact that it's probably going to sell less than the original, and so as many incentives as possible for people to buy it, because at the end of the day, yes, I want to make cool video games, I want to make cool art, and I want to be up my own ass about how important video games are, but like, it is a business, and I have to treat it like one, and I have to think like what's going to work, especially in the face of like broader economic conditions where people have less money to spend. As far as like how we got here, Xalavir didn't have any work for me, and he just offered it.
Sure.
He was like, what if I give you the code base and the IP, and we draft up a little agreement, and you give me a percentage of sales once a quarter, and we'll call it. And that was it. It's like, and I won't get too into the specifics just because like he and I haven't talked about the details of that, but we have a GDC talk that we've submitted and will hopefully get about the longer like development of both CRDM 3 and 1, and sort of doing like a big postmortem on this whole idea. But he gave us like a really just great deal on it. And there was enough to do with a sequel that I never at any point have felt like I'm phoning it in. We have made like a brand new soundtrack. We've completely overhauled the UI. Like, not to say that there was anything wrong with the old one. We just like wanted our own style on it, right?
I am curious about the intent going into the project. You have the assets, you are trying to make this on a much smaller scope and budget and time scale. But I'm curious where you felt there was space for a continuation of this or a sequel. In what ways, from like the first project proposal of we're making another game in this series, what were the ways you thought there was room for expansion or iteration or continuation?
Well, so there's a ton, but really the question is which of those can be done in the short time frame.
Yeah.
So like Dan had implemented this system where if you like beat a match 3 encounter under certain conditions, we could then give additional rewards. So it was like, oh, if you don't ever use this move in this encounter, that's like the challenge, and you can get like an unlock for that. And so we wanted to dig into that, and it was mostly a functional feature, but then it was just like, oh, but then we'd have to like make the UI for it and build that out, and again, because the game has been built 3 different times, there are a bunch of like anchors and weirdo shit where like Tav has run into nightmare scenarios, even just like replacing the UI that's already there, because then like an animation changes and suddenly nothing works anymore because there was a very specific event setup that is made of glass and paper clips. And so, it's a matter of like, oh, now I'm having to get in and debug the code and figure out which specific object has a field on it where something is unassigned and all of that. So basically any changes to the UI that weren't entirely aesthetic were like immediately just like, nope, that's nightmare territory. We can't do that. What I knew would be easy was, just like adding new things to the match 3 board. Like we have like things that like clear the board. We have things that clear specific parts of the board, clear lines, things that give like statuses, but the combinations of those different things are very different. The characterization of Jack Breyer versus JJ is really where the combat encounters are a lot different because they're a lot more plentiful. And so in order to make them more, because the original ethos for CRDM3, as far as Zalavir was concerned, was like Puzzle Quest was like pretty much only using this sort of thing as a combat system. And so he was like, yeah, it's a good combat system, but it should be used for a lot more stuff. And JJ was this sort of like hapless himbo protagonist who like, was definitely out of his element and still capable and more capable than he gave himself credit for. But like, his kit is like, oh, good thing I went to that first aid seminar. So I'll do first aid and I'll take a deep breath to calm myself. And Jack Breyer is this like Leon Kennedy ass, like hardcore guy. And so in order to make the combat and the encounters feel more like Jack Breyer, I knew that the combat had to be a lot more like active. And so the basic combat loop with Jack is that he doesn't have a conventional heal. He has an ability that just gives him lifesteal, and then as much damage as you can deal that turn, you'll heal yourself. He does not have any ways to reduce stress because Jack Breyer is masculine and he would just power through that stress regardless of what the consequences are.
But so what this means for the gameplay, as someone who has played both games, is CRDM1 Re-Raptored is much more about building combos of your moves and setting up a big chunk of supplies and then using them all at once. And so it becomes this sort of long-term planning game to like get yourself ready and then just sock them right in the jaw.
and if anyone has played Final Fantasy XIV, they'll probably recognize this kind of design as like a burst window for your combat rotation. And that's like 100% what it is, because I'm really in that design space right now. And I really liked the aggressive play that it rewards, where like, yeah, if you stack up all your shit in the right order and you're doing your rotation correctly, you're going to have like a huge burst window of damage every 60 seconds or so. And I wanted to take that sort of ethos and apply it to this turn-based match 3 thing because it was so different than what we had done on CRDM 3. And I felt like it really helped like separate them as two different games. It's like, not only should it be a different story and a different protagonist, but it should play differently and feel different despite using very similar mechanics.
So also, it being a puzzle game is something that it's hard for me to understand the different design philosophies that go behind making match 3 puzzles, which are something that have been in the games industry for such a long time, coming up with new ideas to make it feel different, to iterate, to take ideas from other places. And so I'm curious about you and your philosophy on puzzle games, or your experience with puzzle games. What's kind of this design lineage maybe from other match 3 puzzle games, or your favorite puzzle games that you might be drawing inspiration from?
So the funny thing is, I'm not drawing any inspiration from puzzle games because I don't really play them. Like I do, like I for a while was doing like the New York Times crossword and like the my Wordle and shit like that. But in terms of like abstract puzzle games, like any of your match 3s, your Bejeweleds, your Peggles, whatever, I don't really play those. And I think that's fair too, because I think the people who get the most frustrated by CRDM are the match 3 sickos, because it's just like, despite using match 3 mechanics, it really isn't a match 3 game. Because in a match 3 game, the point is like, it's you and the board, and you are essentially trying to set up these really crazy combos. And the truth is, like, other than for building resources, the combos in CRDM3 just like aren't that important, because all you're really doing is lowering your stress. None of the encounters are really built like match 3 encounters, because even if you're doing the same actions, the space in like the goals of what you're trying to use this system for are so fundamentally different that it ends up confusing match 3 gamers, because they're like, well, I'm trying to set up these giant combos, and I'm just like, the combos don't matter. Like, you think the combos matter because that's what your brain is telling you to do, and like that's intuitive, and I get it. It's not like you're wrong, but like it's not it's not what this is built for. What I'm looking at is like, does this fulfill the fantasy of what I'm trying to sell? Does, like, if I'm running from a T-Rex, does this encounter feel like running from a T-Rex? If I'm looking through the pages of a book frantically, does this feel like I'm looking through the pages of a book frantically? So I'm trying to think, like, what actions that I have available to me are mapping to the real life actions that I'm trying to do. That's one of the big ethoses when designing these puzzles. And I broke that a little bit. Like, Jack has like, adrenaline, and the heal is called like, it's like it's not an actual action, because there's no like action that just like heals you when you hit stuff. And so I had to break that rule just a little bit, but for the most part, like, every thing that a character does as an action has like a physical, real world allegory for what it's trying to communicate. And so then it's like, okay, if I'm punching something, I'm either doing damage or I'm making a hole in the board. If I am swinging a sword, I have vertical and horizontal clears for that. Usually with swords, I'll do horizontal, and with the chainsaw, I'll do vertical. All of the design language of the game is trying to abstract physical things that are happening in the encounter into actions that can be affected by the match 3 board. And so it has nothing to do with the like very abstract take of the puzzle, and much more to do with like, is this representative of the thing I'm trying to represent here? Short answer, none. No puzzle games. I'm not looking at puzzle games when I design these. I am thinking purely in this space of like, this is the toolkit I have to work with, and I need to represent this idea. Does that work? Yes. Then I'm going to keep designing this and refine it. And if it doesn't work, it's back to the drawing board.
Yeah, cool. I also want to touch on the narrative. Now, as of recording, I have not finished the game, and as of uploading, no one has beaten the game publicly, because this is going to go up on launch day. So you don't have to get too much into spoilers, but the thing that I am most curious about is where the idea comes from to make this a sequel to a game that doesn't have previous games, but establishes its own world as something that canonically had previous games, and then this is a remake of a game, but it's a sequel. There's a lot of wibbly-wobbly, confusing nonsense, frankly,
Right.
that goes into the world of the CRDM universe. And I'm curious why you felt narratively a sequel would be the right way to go, instead of trying to like retrofit a prequel or something like that.
There were a couple reasons. One was that there was like, quote unquote, established lore. And so, one of the marketing lead ups for CRDM3 was Xalavier basically got like every notable developer he knew under the sun to just start posting on Blue Sky about like fake things that they remember from the first two games, and how excited they were for the third one to finally come out. Like, it was this, whole piece of lost media. So part of it was like, well, if I make the canonical Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 1 or 2, I'm committing the events that have been hinted at in the game into canon, and potentially overriding all the funny shit that people said. So by positioning it as a remake of the canon original, I'm immediately saying like, hey, all that funny shit is still valid, and we can still like make jokes about that. And it doesn't lock anyone into using, like, if Xalavier ever wants to return to Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion as a franchise, it doesn't lock him into using any of the stuff I established, because this just follows afterward, and things could happen afterward at a different time. Things could happen before in a totally different way. None of that matters, because this isn't even the original Jack Breyer. This is Jack Breyer from the remake. Like, I don't touch on it too much, because Jack is like this guy who's like, he's kind of too busy to have an existential crisis and doesn't really care. Like, he's just there to do his job, right? Like, he's a cop. He's doing his thing. So then it was like, okay, well, the joke that Xalavier had been floating for a long time was, we'll make it Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 2 if there's ever a sequel, because it's the second one. That only makes sense. And it'd be funny to have 2 come after 3. And like, it is a funny idea, but I also I liked the number mismatch. And so I thought having the second one be number 2 would just be like too easy.
Yeah.
And then also I started thinking about like, how am I actually going to continue this story? Like, if I want to make a follow-up game to this and keep people interested, like, the way to do that to me seemed to really just be to do a straightforward sequel and just call it something else.
Of course, yeah, because it's really the presentation of the number scheme that is what's confusing.
Right, because the presentation implies that this is a remake of the original game and you're getting all this backstory, but the truth is, like, the events of the canonical CRDM 1 and 2 are really secondary to just like the things that actually happen in CRDM 3. And I felt like continuing those events was a more interesting take for us. And then it also paralleled our actual experience, which made it easier to write, where we're this new studio getting handed off the project.
Sure. Yeah, because something that happens a lot in the games industry is a sequel or a remake being given to a team that's not the original team, and they have to wonder, how are we going to bring our own voice to this? What can we change that's not going to piss fans off? Or how can we bring new ideas to it? It is something that is commentary in how both these games are about development in the games industry.
Well, and it also picks up from the canon of the ending of CRDM 3, where JJ, spoilers, finds out that the game is canceled and never coming out, and that the version of the game he's on is on like a test machine that is just disconnected from the internet. So he's just like stuck here. And he kind of comes to peace with that, but finds out that the game has not only been canceled, but the original developers, Neon Creations, have been shut down, and the IP has been given to the studio Eternal Asylum. The idea is that like the code base and all of the assets have been passed off to Eternal Asylum, and they are actively building the remake of CRDM 1 in the world as you, Jack Breyer and Hunkin, are like existing through that transition. Really, it just came down to a bit of like, actually a straightforward sequel is like the least expected thing. And I think like by doing the most obvious choice for any other game, but not for this one, I'm kind of subverting everyone's expectations.
I agree. Yeah. No, because I actually, in my notes here, the moment I realized, it was like when Hunkin first references JJ, I'm like, I like slapped my forehead and I wrote, "It's a sequel, you jackass, lol." Because of course I had been under the assumption that it was a prequel, that even if it was a remake, the fact that it was a one connotated that this was the events that JJ had referenced of Jack Breyer, and that's not true at all. So I think made the right call. For even as someone who is as in tune as I am, I got that moment of surprise and delight.
Exactly, because I can't trick you into like, oh, this is a video game again, right? Because like that's the whole crux of CRDM 3. Oh, this is a video game, and you didn't know that. And so the reveal in CRDM the 1 that it's a video game, and like the characters are aware of that, not only happens really quickly, but Jack's like, that's interesting. How do I get up the stairs? Like, he doesn't care, and I'm not expecting the audience to care at that point, because I figure most people are going to have played CRDM 3, and if they haven't, it's really just like, yeah, you're playing a video game, and this is a meta video game, and you probably got that from the Steam page. At this point, we don't need to spend much time on that. And Jack's just not the kind of guy to have a crisis about it. So that was the thing I just wanted to keep writing, was like, and, you know, there's a lot less, I think, meta digging in this game. Like, it's much more about how the characters are just reacting to the changes in the world around them. And it's a much more, like, story that is focused much more closely on the characters. And that's, I think, why it's more linear and has fewer branches, is just because I think that one of the bigger like criticisms that the game got was that there were too many paths to check, and people were sort of getting like fatigued trying to 100% it. And especially when making a smaller, lower budget sequel, like it just made more sense to just try and make something that was more contained anyway. And, you know, obviously that change isn't going to please everybody. When I was thinking about how to design this, I'm like, people are here for two reasons. They're there to either continue to the narrative from the first game, or they're there because they really want to fuck around with these puzzles. And yeah, there's some overlap where people want both. But so my goal was to try and just like make as many interesting puzzles as possible and let people like experience those. And I kind of realized that, you know, doing the Metroidvania thing is fun and novel. But at the end of the day, like all that is just a way to lock certain puzzles behind things that are kind of harder to find. And we all agreed in our postmortem, CRDM 3 was too big. Like, we spent too much time making shit for that game, and it was one of the reasons that I ended up eating a whole bunch of time at the end of the project, was polishing all of the shit that we put in. Which, again, was too much. So I figured, fuck it. Like, I can make, you know, this is a game that I can speedrun in an hour. And I did it yesterday to get, you know, and like, you know, that's on max speed and like skipping most of the dialogue and knowing how all of the puzzles work out. I imagine most people are going to beat it in like 3 to 4. I'm basically cutting out all of the fluff and trying to make just like the core of what I felt made CRDM3 resonate with people. And I have the benefit of like hindsight and knowing what I would have changed about the project, what I would have approached differently. And having these smaller fixes. Like one of the things I really wanted to do is I thought it would be really interesting to have Hunkin be the protagonist, because we always had JJ on the left side of the screen. And like that was never challenged in the original game. And so like it was hard coded that the first bar you went to in CRDM3 would not have Hunkin at it, because the first time you approached a bar, like Hunkin wasn't supposed to be there. And then every other time he would show up. And so it meant that like if you were in debug mode and just like went to a bar for the first time, Hunkin wouldn't be there, because that was how it was coded. It had nothing to do with him like, oh, I'm not here, so this rest encounter is set up in a specific way. So the first thing I had to do was like figure out how hard this was going to be to get other protagonists in place. So I had to make a system where in the rest encounters, the portraits could be turned on and off and also overridden. In match 3 encounters, I had to make sure that we had a way to override the player's image and also pull their name from that like profile data, so that it could be like Jack Breyer by default. But then if we pulled in Hunkin, it would be Hunkin. And if we pulled in the Conscience Hunkin, from the book fight, then it would say Conscience Hunkin. And if, and now because I set up that system, I can do that with any character. So that became like a tool that was available. So it was a lot of just like, will I be able to build the systems that allow this to happen? And I set them up in like a few days and it was fine. But it was a matter of like, again, trying to be very like surgical and deliberate with making these very small changes that would have high impact without totally overhauling like the UI or adding new mechanics that were like completely unheard of in the original game. At one point during the baby trading encounter, I was like, oh, it'd be really funny to have like a meter that is actually tracking how much baby Hunkin is worth. And then like you could gain statuses that determine like how many shares in baby Hunkin you have, and when you sell them you get like more money. And if you so that you would actually be building up money, and then like you'd have an ability that once you had enough money built up you could use that ability. But then I was like, okay, the time invested in making that UI element, making sure it loads in a match 3 modifier, making sure that abilities can function based off whether that particular meter is working, like all of that was just like, I'm going to have to spend like several days on this for a one-off in a single encounter. That's just not worth it. So it's very much a matter of being like really tightly scoped, because the end goal of this game was to, all said and done, tracking all of our hours, not go over like a 10 grand budget. And I think we're probably, with like paying marketing and with paying RJ to do the boss track, and then like if I total up all of my hours, we're probably closer to like 14 or 15. But without my hours, since I'm not paying for this game, I'm not paying myself for this game, we're under that 10 grand. And so we got this out the door really cheaply by being really, really strategic with what we were building and what we were changing. It was like, okay, we're making a sequel to the game. We know what this game is, so it is easy for us to scope that and understand like what we're building and stay under budget. And the hope is that with that understanding of something that like we understand and we ship together as a team, we can then take that into our next project and use the funding that we've managed to get for that to say like, okay, so how do we be as economical as possible with this investment, based on like the fact that we have this kind of small investment and like half of it is going to have to just be in company reserves for like tax reasons.
Yeah. So the final thing I want to talk about is what your sort of work balance is with the projects that you're working on. Of course, over the last few months, it's been mostly focused on CRDM 1 and getting that game done. And you're very close to the finish line now. But as of recording yesterday on your Pedalboard server, you announced that your next game is going to be called Big Maxing.
Big Maxing.
And I believe
2 G's, 2 X's.
And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, that you're also still involved in some other strange scaffold projects in the future.
Yes.
And so
I am the effectively the design lead on, or design co-lead on Truck Kun is assisting me from another world.
Yes. So you've over the last couple months, you've had these 3, maybe more, I don't know, projects.
I'm also I'm also a programmer at Critical Bliss, helping them with some of their hentai games. Don't Google Critical Bliss unless you are over the age of 18. Please and thank you.
So, what's that sort of work balance for you, and what do you get out of working on multiple projects for yourself, with your team, for other teams, all at the same time?
Enough money to pay my fucking bills.
There you go.
No, like I have to shout out Logic for that, because like he's been not only very understanding with how busy I am, but giving me like a ton of time to just like ramp up learning Godot and all of these systems. Like it's slow for me because I've been working in Unity for a decade and I'm like figuring this shit out, and like that essentially like pays my mortgage, like barely, but it does, because I'm working that like 20 hours a week. Basically writing dialogue, implementing content, and like learning Godot and their code base from their other programmers. Then Strange Scaffold, I have like a varying amount of work. So I think I'm like cut out for like 35 hours total on Truck-kun this month. And then everything else just goes to Pedalboard. I just kind of work on Pedalboard when I am free and I have the time to do it, because, one of the things that I tried to set up with Pedalboard is like, for, I think, 3 members of the Pedalboard team, this will be their first commercial release. Mostly this is all newbies. And part of the ethos of that for me is like, first, people just aren't hiring juniors. And there are so many people younger than me. Like, I'm 32, I'm not that old, but like, there are people in their 20s who are making phenomenal shit and really know how to make good games, and they're more in tune with what like people younger than me are actually interested in, because whether I'm old or young, whatever your view is, like I'm not as young as the people who are making culture right now. And so I need to be in tune with that. And by giving my younger devs the room to experiment and try and succeed while also instilling good habits in them, all they need is the guidance to work in this professional setting, which I just had enough confidence in them from putting Wheeljam together that wouldn't be difficult or lead to conversations where they were defensive about being corrected for setting this sort of thing up. And so, the way we're looking at Big Maxing now is like, Shane is a network, like an IT specialist in his day job. So he just understands networking, and he has built our Godot lobby system and got it set up with Steam's multiplayer. Like, he just did that. I didn't have to sit over his shoulder. I didn't have to correct him. I didn't have to tell him what to do. He just knew what he was doing. And it's the same thing for Tav when it comes to building websites and UI, and it comes same thing with Aiden for music. Like, I give suggestions here and there, but at the end of the day, like, I want to make these games with these people because they're good at what they do. And I want to give them the space to express themselves and make things and be part of this process, while basically being there as a guide who says, this is how we're going to turn this into a commercial product that people can buy and keep the studio sustainable. I think that ethos is really dead in a lot of the rest of the industry because people aren't able to take risks. And I am extremely fortunate and privileged in that I can take this kind of risk. And so I'm taking it, because if I don't, then I'm squandering this opportunity that I have to like lift up some devs who could do really good work anywhere, and then hopefully set myself up for success so that I can spend more time like trying to represent marginalized devs and grow this studio from like well-meaning juniors and intermediate level devs, and like hiring specialists and senior folks when I need to, when we like absolutely need like people who can provide that structure and experience. But the goal is to, be making games at this scale where, like, failure doesn't need to be the end of the world. Like, not having the most successful game doesn't need to be the end of the world. And so to wrap it around and put kind of a bow on it in terms of, like, why am I doing this on top of Strange Scaffold? There was that moment where I wasn't sure that Strange Scaffold was going to have work for me. And the reality is that I love working at Strange Scaffold. I love working with Xalavier. But I need consistent income. Like that, I need to be able to pay my bills. I need to be able to pay my mortgage, because even if I can rely on my parents, I just don't fucking want to. Like, I want to be my own person. I want to have my own shit. And like, I don't, when I'm relying on my parents, I feel like I'm a teenager again. And like, economic realities aside, I just like don't want to do that. I'm 32 and I'm married and I have pets, and I want to do my shit. So by kind of taking this, we'll call it a calculated risk, I feel making the best with what I have and trying to set up that kind of stability. And the end goal is really to be able to have this studio that is functioning semi-autonomously, so I can sort of take that creative director role and help, mentor devs who want to just build cool shit and provide them some direction and a creative box to fill, and then just kind of keep working at Strange Scaffold, whether they have work for me or not. Because if, like, truth be told, if my livelihood is not contingent on Strange Scaffold paying me, then it becomes even easier and lower stress for me to just keep making those games, because I enjoy working with Xalavir and because I enjoy working with the teams and the people there, because it's just such a phenomenal collection of people. And the reality is it's just not quite as stable as I think all of us want it to be. I think there's like some change happening in the direction of like making it more stable, but I can't say for sure whether Strange Scaffold will ever be like a place of full-time employment for people. I don't know. Xalavir doesn't know. It's kind of like, who knows what the future holds right now, because everything's on fire. But so my goal is to try and keep this as small as possible, keep the scope as small as possible, and like try to not make it balloon, and try to build that stability from the ground up, and provide that space so that, as more and more companies are doing like contract work in short bursts and like kind of having like a rotating cast of contractors, I can make even a small space for people to work full-time and consistently work on games. I will also be stuck in the I'm paying my contractors boat for a while. Like, that's what I'm currently doing. I'm paying contractors. But my number one goal with trying to make like a hit game is like, the first thing I want to do is convert these people to full-time employees and not have them worry about the stability or where their paycheck's coming from or whether they're working enough hours to get paid. I just want to be able to say, here's a few thousand for the month for the work that you're doing. Keep it up.
Yep. Well, you've taken the first real step towards that with the release of CRDM 1. Congrats to you and your team for getting this game finished, for it being as fun as it is, for being responsive and responsible, for scoping things properly. I think it's a really good story that I hope people got a lot out of, for just taking things from and learning, like, hey, learn from your mistakes and build it better for the future. So, Colin, thank you very much for sitting down with me, for talking about Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 1 Re-Raptored. Do you have anything else to say before we say goodbye?
The game's probably out by the time you're seeing this, so please go buy Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 1 Re-Raptored. If you own CRDM 3, there's a bundle with a huge discount, and either way it'll have a 10% launch discount, so you can get it for $8.99. Follow us on Blue Sky. It's where we post the most stuff. We also have a Discord that started out as the Wheel Jam Discord. That's also linked on our Blue Sky and on our website, and there's even a Discord button in CRDM 1. So if you're on the main menu and you tap that, you'll end up at our Discord. Thanks for playing. Thanks for listening. I love you.